We're racing through the chapter on popular music just to talk about how changes in there could be changes in culture due to gender and generation. Um, Migration is correlated to wealth as well as to freedom. So sometimes people migrate and gain wealth, and sometimes they migrate in order to be more free. And a lot of these Berber people are escaping this Arab nationalism. The interest in traditional music is the most modern thing in the world. Remember, once it becomes identified or recognized as traditional, it's already gone. And so when you revive it, that's a very modern thing to do, is to revive tradition. If you just think of who plays self-consciously traditional music, and it's always hipsters, right? um, and just remember the imam, being a traditionalist who's also very, very modern. Pan-Arab identities, this anti-Arab nationalism is taking place in the Reef in explicit reaction against Pan-Arab nationalism that's taking place in the rest of Morocco at the time in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then finally, we end up with the chapter on smuggling. There was a little bit about the Spanish Sahara. We don't have to worry about that. That's we can delete that. Smuggling as state subversion versus smuggling as state reinforcement. And here we have a very interesting point where McMurray is talking about how he used to view smuggling. He would watch those smugglers, and the smugglers would have the picture from the cover, the woman with the she looks like she's like 400 pounds, but it's just with all the extra dresses she's wearing. So she wears all these extra dresses, and underneath the dresses she's got pans and radios, sort of on a harness over her shoulders, and she walks along very slowly. And nobody's going to touch her. Nobody can pat her down because, of course, this is a woman, and she's a respectable woman. And how could you, lay hands on her? So she's allowed to go free. The man just has like a radio and a cooking set that he's bringing across, and they say no, you can't do that. And he lies down in front of them and cries and begs and pleads for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, and finally they say, okay, just go, right, whatever, fine, go. But they do this every single time to the same people are always asked to just beg and plead, and sometimes they get beat up a little bit, and eventually they're allowed to go without paying any taxes, without paying import duties, without getting arrested. They're permitted to go about their business. Why? And so at first he thought, okay, this is state subversion. The people are resisting the power of the state to police them. They are getting away with smuggling, which is pretty big. They're not paying their import duties. They walk right in with their stuff. Once they stop getting beat up, then they pick up their radio and walk across the border. And the thing they paid for, $20 back there, they're going to sell for $100. And they never paid their, extra $50 or whatever of import duty. Is that resistance? Did they show their resistance to the state? And at first, in the 80s, that's what he was thinking, because he's an academic, and the academic trend was to think about resistance and to think about liberation. We're still sort of under the sway of the 70s when there was a little bit of hope. But then after the 90s come along, and we realize that it's all over, capitalism has won, socialism is dead. Then he comes to just to see as it's the power of the state to reinforce their power. And so then he looks at it as a theater of power, that basically in that border crossing is something like a little stage, and what they're doing is they're playing their roles. And so there are roles that the border guards have to play, and that is to be mean to the smuggler, and there are roles that the smuggler has to play, which is to beg and plead and recognize the authority of the state. And as long as the border guard is the power of the state and saying, you should not be doing this, and the smuggler says, yes, I know, please, I beg you, I know I'm a bad person, please, please, please recognize my sorrow and have pity on me, you're such a powerful authority in my life, then they say, okay, you have recognized the authority of the state, you're free to go, right? So it's just a game. It's not really a game. It's a play that they're putting on, that shows that the state still has authority, and so we can think about the bureaucratic state versus the ceremonial regime. And so the bureaucrat, these are two different, it's the same state. It's still, the Moroccan government, but the bureaucratic state sorry, let me do this, three. So the bureaucratic state is concerned with taxes and money and registration, etc. The ceremonial regime is interested in love, honor, respect. So, sometimes, if people are being policed because they have failed to do the right thing, like I got pulled over once in my sister's car, and she didn't have her insurance card in the car. So they're like, you pulled me over, and I'm like, man, I'm in the wrong car. I can't find the insurance thing. He's like, that's okay. Here's a ticket, $100, and you have to pay it if you turn up within 3 days with the insurance card to the county courthouse. So I was like, oh shoot, okay. So it's just money, right? There's money due to the insurance companies by me, and this is a state requirement. And so I go back and I get in the, I go talk to my sister, and she's like, oh, there it is. That's why you didn't see it. And I'm like, okay, thank you. And so I take it back and I take it up there, and it's like an hour there and an hour back. So I'm like, 3 hours of my life is gone, but I don't have to pay $100. So, whatever. I do what they do, what they ask me to. And that's the bureaucratic state. But then there's also the ceremonial regime. And this is the idea that the state demands love and honor and respect. And so once I was driving my beat up, dingy little truck with all the stickers on it, and I went past the national Civil War battleground. It's a national park, and you slow down and you stop and then you start up, and it was 35 at the top of the hill. But it was 25 right there. But I'm accelerating because I'm trying to get home to my grandparents, and this police car pulls in behind me and turns on the lights, and I'm like, well, shoot, what's going on? I pull over, and it's one of the national park guards, the National Park Service or whatever. And I'm like, hi, are you? I see your lights. Are you a police officer? He's like, I'm a federal agent. And I was like, dude, haven't I seen you before? I'm like, no, I don't know who you are. Oh, really? And then he looked at me, and then he realized that he had the wrong person. He was just looking to mess with some miscreant that he knew from the neighborhood, and he was acting all puffed up and all like federal agent, like he's the FBI or something, because he's just looking for respect, right? He's a figure of authority, and I need to respect him. And so it's a completely different game that we're supposed to play, and I wasn't playing it, and I didn't get a ticket because he didn't actually know who I was, and he was maybe scared because I was being kind of not very friendly. But in any case, the point is that states are the same state can have a lot of different characters to it. States are complex, fragmented, and sometimes contradictory. So the same thing might be to say, what is up with America? Is the American government in favor of restricting abortion access or expanding it? And I ask an American, and they're like, depends on which party you belong to, which depends on which aspect of the state, depends on which members of Congress are voting which way. It's very complicated. But there's some people who say this, and there's some people who say that. I'm like, yeah, that's reasonable. But then when someone turns to me and says, what is up with the Saudi government? What is their perspective on, Islamic extremism? And I'm like, depends on who you ask, right? The Saudi, this is what the Saudis want. Who are the Saudis? Right? There's lots of Saudis. There's millions and millions of Saudis, and there's a lot of different ones and different kinds of power and authority in their government. But it seems like if we can point to the Chinese or the Saudis or, the Europeans or, what does Pyongyang really want? Then we can sort of make it very simple, and it's never simple. States are complex, lots of different moving parts. They are fragmented. Usually, the states, the governments are the result of very, very closely fought compromises between two two or more factions that just hate each other and are always trying to tear each other down. And sometimes they're working at cross purposes. And so one part of the state is like, it's all about getting those taxes paid, and the other part of the state says we don't care about the taxes so long as we get respect. And so they run right past each other. So this is very important when we're talking about Middle Eastern political analysis, etc. Okay, now on to the movie. I want you to watch Alizawa. It's a great film. It's won awards. It's a little bit aggressive. So a little trigger warning here. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of violence involving children. And it's real in a way that if they were actors, they wouldn't be, because they are not all actors. They are actual street children who were recruited by the director and taught how to act. And it can be very, very difficult to watch. Okay, so if you have difficulty with violence occurring, children being involved, children doing violence to one another, and death and injury and that sort of thing, it's a pretty significant death right off the bat. I mean, the whole plot line is these little kids, their friend has died, and they're trying to bury him, and they're all street children. They're all addicted to they're all glue sniffers and petty criminals who live on the streets and basically hurt and exploit and rape each other all the time. So anyway, go ahead and watch it. It's a gritty, gritty movie, and I'll put in a little selection there. The first few pages of Le Pain Nu, something about bread. I don't remember what the English title is. It's Mohammed Murabit's autobiography. Is it Mohammed Murabit? One of those guys. His autobiography. So I'll throw that up there. It's it's an autobiography from the 1950s that sort of shows the suffering and violence of poor Moroccans that is trying to be depicted in this film, roughly depicted in the film. Okay.